Kazuki Takahashi was born in 1961. 29 years later, he published his first manga. However, he would not meet with full success until 1996. Influenced by American sci-fi and horror movies, superhero comics, and yes, even a few other Japanese anime and manga, his first major success, Yugioh, was released. Takahashi was a nerd. He loved tabletop games, toys, technology, video games, as well as all the things I mentioned earlier. And all of these things permeated Yugioh. But the series wouldn't become the juggernaut it is today until he introduced Seto Kaiba, and with him a card game, which at the time was likely inspired by a game he liked but hadn't caught on in Japan, Magic the Gathering. Despite this, the first version of the anime made in 1998 was before the explosion of popularity that was both the card game and the manga series itself. The card game had already been introduced in the manga, and the first anime had multiple episodes based around it, yet it did not succeed. However, the manga had become so popular that a year and a half after the end of the first anime, a second was greenlit. And by this time, the card game had exploded in popularity. And in April of 2000, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters came out in Japan. A year and a half later, it would also air in the US. Dubbed by 4Kids, with the card game brought over by Upper Deck Entertainment, it was well known for its censorship and making the dialogue more cheesy than the Japanese original. Still, it struck as much a chord here in the US as it did in Japan. For Takahashi, this success was more than he could have hoped for. He had created not only an amazing manga, but one of the most successful card games in the world. He would continue to see dividends of this series to the point he became a supervisor of the brand and mostly retired from making manga. He became friends with Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, and he even got to write a comic book for an American studio. In early July 2022, Kazuki Takahashi's body was found off the coast of Naga, Okinawa in Japan. His life and success cut tragically short. He had drowned. Hello there, Eliza here, and if you are still with me after that rather somber opening, welcome to Does It Hold Up? The news of Kazuki Takahashi's death hit me rather hard, as he was one of the only manga creators I ever got to meet in person. When I woke up to continue editing the materials for one of my reviews, I saw the news and I knew I needed to move this to this spot, as this review wasn't planned to occur until much later on. Other than open slots for Patreon requests, I have a schedule planned until April of next year, although that has been thrown off by the heat wave that occurred in July, and this review was planned for late November. You see, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was an important part of my life from high school onward. I was in early high school when the card game and show came out, and me and my friends who already played Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and several other card games, as well as tabletop games like D&D, were drawn to it. We would have monthly tournaments with anti-rules, which I always won. I made it to regionals twice back in the early competitive. I ran a card shop where I bought and sold Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. I was the judge for an exhibition match Little Karibo was a part of at Anime Vegas. I even utilized a dual disc in my original YouTube channel to draw what my next review would be on. So I'm going to do something a little different with this episode and say one thing before I begin. Regardless of whether or not it holds up writing-wise, it is still a seminal part of culture and something that will always be dear to my heart. With all that said, let's see if Yu-Gi-Oh's first episode, The Heart of the Cards, holds up. I need to start by saying this. The woodwinds at the start give the show a very ethereal, ancient quality. Despite us not knowing what ancient Egyptian music would have sounded like, this does give a feel of ancient and mildly Egyptian. As many of you already know from my previous episodes, my disdain of openings that just use clips from the show is very strong, especially with anime. Yet I wasn't bothered by it with Pizza Cats, and I'm not bothered by it here either due to the rather slick editing. Also, despite the lack of lyrics, the bombast of the instruments makes the opening. It gives a sense of looming threats, but with the sudden stop of the music as Yami says it's time to duel, it picks up into triumph.
It's time to duel!
As it states heroes will rise to meet those threats, and having Kaiba appear amongst Yugi's allies is decent foreshadowing for the long game. As for how the episode begins, I love that they start off showing a game being played by Yugi and Joey. These two are the heart of the show, and the friendly teaching game Yugi is playing with him is a great way to set things up. When I worked at a comic shop, I played teaching games all the time. It was always so much fun to help people learn to play a new game. And you can see that joy on Yugi's face as he helps Joey learn. You also get a great feel for Joey's excitement to learn a new game he can play with his best pals. I also love that they have Tristan being the one not in the know and Taya being the one to describe the game to him. So that way we know that Yugi already explained the rules to Joey. It's subtle storytelling, and it's great. You also see other characters who will be important later on here, with Bakura watching the game between Yugi and Joey. Although I have to wonder why Yugi seems to have never told his best friends about his grandpa's game shop before this.
See, my grandpa owns a game shop, and I get all my best cards from him.
Your own game shop? What are we waiting for? Let's go!
I think it would have been better if Yugi had said, I was able to improve my deck with the latest cards that got shipped to my grandpa's shop this morning. And have Joey respond to that by saying, a new set? Why didn't you tell me sooner, Yug? It would have been more natural sounding dialogue and not made it seem like Yugi felt embarrassed by his friends for them to not know he lives above a game shop. I must say that Kaiba jumping to conclusions about a small local game shop having a rare card immediately thinking, it has to be the Blue Eyes, is the kind of logical leap I would make. Again, the dialogue is what hurts this first episode. Yugioh's first season is a little rough on it. I personally would have rewrote the dialogue.
Gramps, could you show my friends your awesome super rare card?
Rare card? My special card?
Please, please!
Pretty please?
Ha ha! How can I refuse?
Here to say, hey Grandpa, do you mind showing us your super rare card? Now, what card might you be talking about there, Yugi? Grandpa. Oh, alright. The dialogue after that is fine, but the intro dialogue to that scene is very cringe. And everyone's reaction to Tristan just grabbing the card is great. Grandpa is mortified, Yugi and Taya are immediately embarrassed because of Tristan's actions, and it takes a few seconds for Joey to realize that Tristan did a dumb thing. The look of, oh gods, I screwed up on Tristan's face after Grandpa Solomon takes the card back is priceless, especially since Joey's immediate ask to trade is misconstrued by Solomon to mean he wants to trade for the Blue Eyes. So since Yugi's friends didn't know that his family lived at a game shop, how did Kaiba know which game shop to go to? The city canonically has at least 5. Did he go to each one trying to find the one Yugi lived at? Did he follow Yugi? Did he put a tracking device in Yugi's lunch? The ignorance the characters show is real. I mean, not even Yugi seemed to know Kaiba was ranked number 1 and he's an obsessed gamer. Kaiba's eyesight is surprisingly good. He must eat a lot of carrots. And Solomon's speech right here actually hits me hard.
I'm sure you could. This card is worth more to me than you could ever offer. Not because of its power, or because it's so rare, but because of what it means to me.
I have several cards from various trading card games I will never sell because of how I came to acquire them. For example, I have a Voltorb card. That was basically how I got introduced to Pokemon. It was given to me by a friend just before I moved away from my hometown. It is one of my most treasured possessions. I also have a copy of the Sasuke Samurai card from Yugioh that was given to me by a friend as he went off to join the military and was killed in action. These 2 cards aren't rare, but they are more precious to me than all the rare cards I own, and I have both an Alpha and a Beta Black Lotus. I think this scene is supposed to take place the next morning before the shop opens, but as someone who worked at a comic and game shop, why are the lights off if the door is unlocked? If the shop is open, the lights should be on, and if the shop is closed, the door should be locked. Also, why does he seem to be straightening things up? You usually do that only before opening or after closing, which would further imply the shop is closed, but again, the door is unlocked. How early in the morning is he taken? As most comic and game shops, even in Japan, open at around 10 a.m., in Japanese high school starts at 8 a.m., and lets out around 4 p.m., if it's closer to the morning after Yugi left for school but before the shop opened, that would put the abduction at around 9 a.m., but that would mean the shop was left unattended and unlocked for 7 hours. If it's closer to the time the school lets out, that would be more likely, but that even raises further questions about why the lights were off and...
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Also, we see later on there are multiple game shops in the city, and Solomon's is literally just named Game Shop. No wonder we never see any customers here. And again, Yugi just assuming Kaiba did something when Kaiba says his grandpa isn't feeling well. That plus the earlier scene with Joey and Kaiba lets you know that most people think he's a jerk. And it's actually a solid bit of subtle storytelling. Kaiba tearing the card here doesn't make any sense. In the original manga it does because of the context, but here not so much. It was in the ownership of an elderly man who ran a game shop that is so underwhelming it is literally named Game Shop that had no intention of ever using the card. Kaiba literally created his own problem here. This plot only happens because Kaiba is an idiot for this story. And it gets even dumber with Solomon saying, Yugi, take my deck that already lost once to Kaiba and beat him with it even though you likely have your own deck. Also, how would Yugi using his grandfather's cards teach anyone about the heart of the cards? Yugi's heart isn't in those cards, his grandfather's heart is. Shouldn't Yugi be using his own deck where his heart is in the cards? Again, in the original manga, all of this makes more sense, but I am judging the anime, not the manga. It seems that the others seem to be aware magic exists, or at least Joey is aware, as he says that Yugi can do this because he has the Millennium Puzzle.
Trust me, you're like the best player I've ever seen, and you've got the Millennium Puzzle. You can do this, Yugi!
And I actually like the smiley face of friendship and unity that Taya draws on their hands. I'm a bit of a sucker for having something drawn in multiple parts that come together. I also like how Joey goes back to support Yugi as a cheerleader. Also, Kaiba seems visually stunned after Yugi's transformation, almost like he actually witnessed it. This is a big plot hole for later in the anime, but just a thing to point out here. Now, I'm not going to judge the card game they play here because there are better YouTubes to cover that, and while I did play competitively back in the day, the rules of the in-universe game are different to our out-of-universe game, and they don't really reach similarity until around GX. I will, however, judge any stupidity they pull in this game. First off, why are there ancient stone pillars and a stone seating arrangement like a coliseum behind them in a recently constructed virtual stadium? There is no mechanical point to them, so is it just for the aesthetic? If so, Kaiba must really love ancient Rome. Huh. I forgot Mokuba shows up in the first episode. I only noticed this from constantly editing my videos with my crappy mic, but Kaiba's voice at points, the audio quality drops off.
You're not faring any better than the old man did, Yugi. Your deck is just as weak and feeble as your grandfather.
Did Kaiba forget that Yugi is using his grandpa's deck? Because that isn't Yugi's deck. It is his grandfather's. I mean, Kaiba was in the room when Solomon handed the deck to Yugi. That makes it almost believable that Kaiba can deny magic despite seeing it over and over again in the series. Also, the first usage of the puzzle's magic in the show, used to draw Gaia. Okay, Kaiba just summoned 2 monsters in a single turn. Everyone likes to say that no, Kaiba summoned 3 Blue Eyes over multiple turns, and while that is true for the third Blue Eyes 1 and 2 come out on the same turn. And again, I love the fact that the drawing Taya did on their hands is a nice little foreshadowing to what is coming up with ElizaGWR. An image in multiple parts you can only see when you bring them all together.
For someone claiming to have faith, you're giving up too easily, Yugi.
Okay, is Solomon magic? Is Yugi actually hearing Grandpa Solomon, or is it just his cognition of his memories of his grandfather? I could buy Solomon being actual magic because we learn he used to essentially be an archaeologist going after mystical artifacts later on.
Don't lose focus, Yugi.
Also, how aware is Yugi of Yami at this point? I mean, does Yugi constantly tell himself that he shouldn't give up in the third person? Again, this is great storytelling. It shows off the magic of the puzzle. Yugi's trust and friendship with his 3 closest friends, and does the summoning of ElizaGWR, showing off that indeed his grandfather's deck has several tricks. Also, in a few, I will explain why this makes more sense in the manga. Kaiba claiming ElizaGWR is impossible fills me with such laughter, as one of my 10 main decks is an ElizaGWR deck, and I summon ElizaGWR all the time. Solomon waking and knowing Yugi won immediately after really drives home the Solomon maybe magic thing I mentioned earlier, and the showing off of Pegasus to foreshadowing what's coming next is a nice touch. The closing credits is just a worse version of the opening credits, so let's ignore them and talk about the thing I mentioned earlier. Now, the reason why Yugi using his grandfather's deck makes more sense in the manga is because Yugi and Joey were taken to Kaiba's house the day before in a previous chapter while at an arcade. Yugi did not have his deck on him, or the ability to go grab it from home. Here, Yugi had time to do both. Also, I don't think we get to see Yugi's solo deck until the Millennium World arc because of this. And yes, you aren't seeing things. I'm continuing the review despite the first episode being over, as I decided to overhaul the formula of Does It Hold Up a bit. From now on, I'm going to briefly talk about up to episode 5, not as in-depth as the first episode when I do season openers, and eventually also do a greater overview of each series before doing the episode on the season finale. The reason is because I know I will eventually be hitting shows that have 5-part series openers.
Long ago, when the pyramids were still young.
Okay, why is there the overview of the Millennium items in the second episode over the first? That feels weird. Granted, the first episode was already a hodgepodge of multiple different story arcs and the manga, so yeah, I guess I can understand it. It just feels weird having a full minute lore drop about how the series works in the second episode before the opening credits. Also, this is one of the first times you see Taya duel and she actually wins, And she says that she won again. Taya is actually a skilled duelist. The look of worry on Yugi's face as he goes through Joey's deck, I get that so much. Reminds me of all the times I used to look through other people's decks to check them out, and I would suggest complete overhauls because of how bad they were. Still, I love Joey wanting to get better. While Yugi is already good at things and just needs self-confidence, which is what the Pharaoh gives him, Joey's entire story throughout the series, both manga and anime, is self-improvement. I love Yugi using reverse psychology and his grandfather's gambling nature against him to get him to teach Joey. Yugi is far more calculating and shrewd than people give him credit for. I don't think many people notice this, but Weevil and Rex are kind of set up to be dark reflections of Yugi and Joey. Weevil is just as shrewd and calculating as Yugi, but despite being potentially on par with Yugi's skills, he constantly throws it away via his lack of self-confidence leading to cheating. Meanwhile, Rex is just as boneheaded as Joey, and his biggest vice is constantly being taken advantage of. In Joey's case, it's because of his trusting nature, wanting to see the best in people, while for Rex, it's his overconfidence. You have to hand it to Kazuki to craft decent mirrors to the two leads just about a year into the manga's run, and the animation director for knowing how to have the previous scene lead into the introduction of Rex and Weevil. I personally love the fact that Pegasus, despite knowing that Yugi may have taken part in the Duelist Kingdom tournament on his own, made sure that Yugi took part by sending him the package. In the first Shadow game scene in the show, being Yugi versus a pre-recorded tape shows off the power of Pegasus' Millennium Eye. This is also a great way of showing how the Millennium Eye works, especially with Yugi realizing a way around Millennium Eye in this duel. In fact, Yugi may have won had the timer not run out. Granted, the anime does handle Grandpa's soul being taken better than over the rather silly thing in the manga where he's stuck inside of a video camera. And it does do a great job of setting up Pegasus as a threat, as he is able to use his power even through a pre-recorded tape. The third episode does a great job at showing what I was talking about before, Rex and Weevil being dark counterparts to Joey and Yugi, respectively, and the things that make them said perversions of our main duo, namely Weevil's cheating by throwing away the ElizaGWR pieces, and Rex's being manipulated by Mai. Yugi and Joey's friendship is also further shown off, as well as introducing new elements such as Joey's sister Serenity, the reason Joey duels, and new characters such as Mai, who I previously mentioned. It also shows off how much Joey has grown since the backstory, with Joey having thrown Yugi's puzzle pieces into a pool in the backstory, yet here you see him diving in after Weevil does the same with ElizaGWR without hesitation on a boat traveling across the ocean. And we saw earlier how much Yugi trusts Joey by giving him one of his star chips and allowing both of them to compete. And like Jeff over at Mother's Basement once said, Yugi giving Joey Time Wizard after Joey gets Baby Dragon is both one of the greatest and scummiest things Yugi ever does. Also, Taya, Tristan, and Bakura all snuck aboard the ship as well. In episode 4, I love seeing how nervous Tristan is about being caught. It does help layer his personality. I'm going to be talking a bit about both episodes 4 and 5 right here as one, because it was originally presented in America as 1 hour-long episode. Due to the events of the previous episode, Yugi has no question about who he faces first, Weevil. And again, you see Yugi's calculating mind with him figuring out what Weevil is up to as he chases him. Weevil thinks he has the upper hand due to his cheating, but Yugi figured it out beforehand. In fact, Yugi is so confident in being able to defeat Weevil that he bets his grandfather's deck. The look on Weevil's face as he realizes Yugi figured him out and has no advantages is priceless. Also, how does Weevil not know the difference between whether Yugi played a monster or a trap card, as they are played in different rows?
Oh, that Mai! She's always butting in with her big mouth. Well, I'm not gonna let her trash my friends.
Wait, Mai is always butting in? Why does Taya say Mai is always butting in? This is literally only the second time they met. Taya's kind of being a bit judgy here. Also, Weevil has some of the greatest facial animations in all of anime, going from evil to crazed maniac to shock to plain over the top in just rapid succession. This has some great showing of mechanics that'll become more prevalent in the show later on, like effect cards causing other monsters to change, like the Cocoon of Evolution, and polymerization. And again, this shows more of their dark mirroring with each other, with both playing and counterplaying, trying to anticipate the other's moves. Though you can also see that Weevil's is based on his cheating due to his lack of confidence, versus Yugi, who is drawing it from his faith in his grandfather's deck and his friends. There are a few misplays as well as some story over mechanics events, but it is a really good duel once you realize that Weevil is essentially Yugi's mirror for this story arc. The battle ending with Yugi getting Weevil's star chips and Joey taking Weevil's glove is just icing on the cake. And that's the series opener and a brief look at the next 4 episodes. So now the question becomes, does Yu-Gi-Oh's first episode and premiere still hold up? The answer is, save for a few bits of stilted dialogue that I mentioned how they could have done them better, some stilted animation due to being anime, and the first episode being a haphazard conglomeration of multiple chapters of the manga, yes, this show holds up. Kazuki Takahashi's masterful writing and understanding of these characters still shines through, and does so even more over the next few episodes, especially with having Weevil being a dark reflection of Yugi without any friends or confidence, as well as introducing the threat of Pegasus. I would suggest Yugioh as a show to watch. It doesn't just get by because of the card game. The story is well told, even with Chop Chop, and it's the characters that truly shine. When it comes to comics, there's a thing where you want to have the silhouette that is unmistakable as to who the character is just by seeing it. Kazuki Takahashi had a rare talent to make personalities that, if you could do the same, would still be unmistakable. His talent will surely be missed in the world. But rather than just hear it from me, I asked for some others to lend their voice about Yugioh.
Yugioh was something that was very important to me. I was not the happiest person in my school. Lot of issues there, don't want to go into it. But one thing I did do a lot was play Yu-Gi-Oh with some people during lunch break in a small room that people who wasn't all too happy with going outside go into. Had a lot of fun times. For my final year of school, me and my friends had the dumbest thing where we used Yu-Gi-Oh Card Maker to make decks based on shit that we loved, just to see if we could make the most balanced but still fun deck. My main deck was a Sonic deck I made, as well as a Dark Brotherhood from Oblivion deck. All in all, I love Yu-Gi-Oh! It's something that comes in and out of my life a lot, but hopefully it will never leave. Thank you for all the amazing times.
And with all that said, that was the premiere of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you want to help make this show better, I have a Patreon. Being a patron gives you access to videos in advance, scripts in advance, voting on topics, access to my Discord, and more. I have a Twitter as well where I post sporadically. I am getting better at remembering it. And I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you all next time when I cover Spider-Man and his amazing friends.